the man without a nation arrives back again this week to bring you the latest anime news. This is John, bringing you the remaining AnimeNation podcast. I suppose I can put it that way. Not to suggest that I'm going anywhere, but as many of you know, AnimeNation itself, to a large extent, has sailed for the horizons. But on other distant, forthcoming horizons, we have news now from Bandai Namco that the God Eater video game franchise is going to be getting an anime television series. This is one of these sort of announcements that strikes me, at least, as a long time in coming announcement, particularly because the new anime television series will be produced by UFO Table, which actually produced a 12-minute long God Eater Burst prequel promotional anime back in 2011. So it's been a number of years now since the God Eater franchise premiered. For those of you that are not familiar with it, it's a PlayStation sort of rival somewhat to Capcom's Monster Hunter franchise. But considering that UFO Table produced a slick-looking anime back 3 years ago, it's a long time in coming now that 3 years later they're finally getting tapped to produce a full-length television series. The TV series will be coinciding roughly with the Japanese premiere of the God Eater 2 PlayStation 4 video game. So we now have relatively reliable confirmation that the recently ended Tokyo Ghoul television series will be getting a second season. The official Chinese website for the Japanese television series has announced that a second season will premiere in January. Now this is quite unusual because for a Japanese show, we would typically expect the Japanese homepage to be the first place to announce a sequel series. Considering that this is a Chinese site and we typically don't get anime announcements out of China, there's no really telling how reliable this announcement is, whether it's actually confirmed or whether it's just hopeful thinking on the part of the Chinese website managers. But at least tentatively, there is supposedly a plan for a sequel second series of Tokyo Ghoul next January. This would be relatively quickly, considering that the first season just ended this past week. But then again, with a title like this, it was probably anticipated that it would go over pretty well because it got pretty heavy promotion in advance. So there were probably plans from very early on for a potential second season. Milky Holmes is also getting a new season. This will be its fourth season since the series premiered in 2010. The new Milky Holmes series will be titled Tante Kageki Milky Holmes TD. Now, I don't know what the TD stands for, but we'll find out probably sometime early next year when the series premieres. I have to admit that largely I have not been much of a fan or follower of the Milky Holmes franchise, although I did sort of like the last third TV series, which only starred the main characters as supporting characters. Let's see, in other news, Nisekoi is getting a second OAD. The 14th volume of the manga by Naoshi Komi will be coming out in Japan on October 3rd in a regular and a limited edition. The limited edition will include an OVA produced by the TV series animation staff, which will adapt chapters 58 and 64 of the original manga. So that will be the first OAD available next month, and then on February 4th of next year, the 16th volume, skipping over 15, the 16th manga volume will be released in a regular and a limited edition, and the 16th limited edition volume will include the second OAD episode, which will adapt manga chapters 65 and 71. Once again, Nisekoi is likewise a show that really didn't pique my interest very much. I've seen many other anime of this variety. I've seen other anime of this variety that I like more. Nisekoi is another one of these multitudinous shows about a high school boy and girl who essentially have to pretend to have a ongoing romantic relationship because one of them is involved in the Yakuza. Once again, my terrible habit of forgetting names arises, so I've forgotten entirely the name of the show from a year and a half ago that starred the girl who looked like she came out of Kanagi. But I'm sure many of you folks know what I'm talking about. There's also the Seto no Hanayome television series, which is also a daughter of a Yakuza program. Strictly speaking, it's on the tip of my tongue, but the one that Madhouse animated a couple years ago is another one, but the main character now is much older, so it doesn't really count. But regardless, Nisekoi was relatively popular, so those of you that like it can look forward to another episode in next month, and then one in the beginning of next year, at least. Probably a significant fewer number of Americans will be looking forward to Ganbare Lulu Lolo television series, but it's always interesting to know what new anime is on the horizon, and we do know now that at the end of this month, on September 25th, the first episode of the second Ganbare Lulu Lolo Tiny Twin Bears television series will premiere. The series is actually based on the Kuma no Gakko, or Bears School, children's picture book, written by Hiroyuki Arihara and illustrated by Nami Adachi, which got an hour-long anime feature film called Kuma no Gakko back in 2010. Then that spun off into a television series called Ganbare Lulu Lolo Tiny Twin Bears in 2013. I have not watched the movie, but I do remember vaguely watching the first episode of the 2013 television series. It's a show in the vein of stylistically similar to much of the Hello Kitty anime. So if you've ever watched an episode of Hello Kitty, you know basically what Tiny Twin Bears is like. The primary difference is the art design. While the Hello Kitty anime typically uses a traditional 2D anime design, Tiny Twin Bears uses a design much more in the style of collage painting, or possibly very rich-looking watercolor painting, so it doesn't exactly look like conventional 2D anime, although it is conventional 2D anime. Tiny Twin Bears is a pleasant, relatively charming show for small children. It's a little bit slow-moving, a little bit placid and restrained, so that's particularly why it's never been particularly well-known or popular among American viewers. But it is successful enough among Japanese viewers that it will be getting a new TV series, a second season, as I mentioned, on the 25th of this month. The 2-volume Aoki Hagane no Arpeggio movies have got at least partial titles and release dates now, and that's good news. The Aoki Hagane no Arpeggio, or Arpeggio of Blue Steel, sci-fi anime television series premiered with relatively little fanfare and promotion last year, and I think to the surprise of a lot of people, turned into a moderate cult hit. This may be some surprise because the show was animated with a rather less than stellar looking CG. Now, granted, the CG wasn't quite as bad looking and wasn't quite as stilted in movement as the more recent Knights of Sidonia anime was, but it was still not exactly a tremendously attractive-looking anime, despite it having attractive-looking characters. However, the show made up for its weakness in visual design with strong characters and a very, very fast-paced, action-oriented story. So we now know that the first of 2 Blue Steel movies will be titled Aoki Hagane no Arpeggio Ars Nova DC, and it will premiere in Japanese theaters on January 31st. Supposedly the DC does not stand for Director's Cut. Supposedly it's going to have some significance to the movie, but it remains to be seen what it actually is, because the first movie is going to be a typical, condensed, slightly altered retelling of the television series story. However, what fans can really look forward to is the second movie, which supposedly will be an entirely new story. Like many of those cultish fans, I did happen to quite enjoy the Aoki Hagane no Arpeggio television series, so I will look forward to the movie and look forward even more so to the second feature film. The Karakyo Hitman manga series by Hiroshi Muto is getting a new drama adaptation. The manga about a salaryman who has to take up the role of a professional paid killer, contract killer, premiered in 2005 and is currently ongoing. The manga is quite popular and has been translated into a number of languages. It also got a live-action feature film in 2009. Well, starting on October 1st, the BTV streaming and multimedia device network will start simulcasting or streaming a new Hitman from Today live-action television series. Sorry, not strictly speaking television series. Online web series. This particular series will star Jun Kaname, the star of live-action TV shows including Kamen Rider Agito, and a star in the live-action Graveyard of Fireflies television movie. So, I'm not sure that this particular show will make it over here to America, nor sure that it will become very popular in America, but it's always interesting for otaku to keep up with what type of adaptations are out there and which ones are coming up. So moving from what's coming up to what is available now, domestically at least, Funimation this past week released the 7th volume of its Uncut Dragon Ball Z Blu-ray release. However, uncut is a slight misnomer. While the footage narratively is not uncut, the screen is somewhat cut, and the, well actually it's not. It's not, forgive me. They are an original 4-screen ratio. However, the color design has been heavily tweaked. The music has also been tweaked. So many of you by now know that you're getting a somewhat Americanized Dragon Ball Z, and if you really want the genuine Japanese broadcast version, you have to hunt down the now very rare and expensive Dragon Box DVD releases. Funimation this past week also released its 12th BD and DVD combo volume of Fairy Tail. And this past week, Funimation released an official limited edition American import of the 3rd Ghost in the Shell Arise Blu-ray. Sentai Filmworks this past week released the second half of the Majestic Prince television series on separate DVD and Blu-ray releases. Viz released the 3rd remastered authentic release volume of Ranma Niban no Ichi on separate DVD and Blu-ray. Aniplex, Boo and Hiss, as you choose, released the first season of Kakameki Valverave, or Valverave the Liberator, on limited edition domestic Blu-ray. That, again, Boo and Hiss, retails at a retail price of $149.98. And Senodime, this past week, released the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal on edited, English-dubbed domestic DVD. So, I've already shared my opinion on the domestic release of the Dragon Ball Z Blu-rays, so no need to reiterate there. At least we are getting Fairy Tail in an authentic presentation. I'm a little bit behind on these. This is volume 12. I only have purchased them so far up to volume 6. So, as I mentioned, I'm a little bit behind. I also have not picked up the movie yet. But the movie, the Fairy Tail motion picture, honestly just wasn't really that good. So I'm not really in a tremendous hurry to pick that one up. Although, just for sense of completion, I would like to have it in my collection eventually. I've mentioned before that Majestic Prince is a relatively good show. It's a show that a lot of people say didn't quite fulfill its potential and didn't quite hang together narratively quite as well as people would have liked it to. But then the also word is that it does get better if you stick with it. So now you have an opportunity to pick up the second half, which is supposedly the better portion of the show. I have picked up the first two of Viz's Ranma 1/2 Blu-rays. The third one snuck up on me a little bit, so I have not purchased this one yet. But I do expect to pick this one up soon, because I do want to support Viz releasing a really praiseworthy, high-quality, faithful and authentic domestic release of a Japanese Blu-ray release. So while many of Viz's releases have had problems or have not been quite up to the quality we would have liked, at least Ranma 1/2 is up to the quality we expect. So that's why I particularly want to support this show, even though I already own all of the Viz DVD releases. Valvrave, I did watch the complete first season. The second season was still good, but felt just slightly different. But largely, I just got distracted, so I never sadly finished the Valvrave television series. But what I did watch, I respected and enjoyed quite a bit. Valvrave, like many of the Aniplex releases, is one that I would certainly like to have in my collection. But I only have a very small number of Aniplex titles in my collection, because at $150 for the first half of the show, on my salary, I simply can't afford it. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not a title that I've ever heavily criticized. I'm not one that dislikes kids anime just because they're kids anime. But I am still disappointed that we are consistently and still getting children's anime strictly in censored, edited, dubbed versions. That's why I'm not buying Yu-Gi-Oh! DVDs. If we ever were to get uncut, subtitled Yu-Gi-Oh! DVDs here domestically, I would buy them. But there are very few people like me in a number of respects. But there are very few people like me that would buy authentic Japanese language kids anime, and particularly hobby anime. So on the subject of shonen anime, I've seen some praise of Hunter x Hunter episode 147 that just aired. It's the penultimate episode. My understanding is that next week's episode will be the final episode. I have to say that contrary to some of the praise, I was rather disappointed with Hunter x Hunter episode 147. A significant portion of the first half of the episode is a lengthy and redundant monologue from a character that most, I imagine, viewers had forgotten even existed. This is such an obscure, such a minor character that it actually took me a moment to remember who it was upon seeing this character again. Seeing the character lay out a extended, profuse apology can be very, very emotionally impactful, can be very empathy generating when it comes from a character that we care about, when it comes from a character that we have followed and grown with. However, seeing a lengthy sob story, if you will, from a character that we have no affiliation with, no immersion with, no consideration for, really has very, very little emotional impact on viewers. Furthermore, as a professional writer and professional writing teacher, concision is of tremendous value to me. So seeing a lengthy monologue that largely reiterates some of the same ideas repeatedly is a little bit frustrating. Furthermore, still, seeing this lengthy confession come to a character that we don't recognize at first, furthermore, really compromises the effectiveness and emotional impact of the scene. So, if that were not the only apology in the episode contains several more apologies, which all really give me the impression that these are a surrogate for Togashi, the creator, personally apologizing to viewers and readers for the series taking so long to complete and ending on such a somewhat anticlimactic point. There has been a lot of criticism about the final meeting and parting between Gon and Killua being a little bit underwhelming, seeming possibly a little bit unnatural, a little bit unsatisfying. I had less criticism of the second half of the episode than I did the first, but I can understand and empathize with the criticism. And once again, I really get the impression that this is a case of Togashi really deliberately trying to just wrap up the story, or at least the story arc, as quickly as he possibly can, because he doesn't want to draw anymore, because he's deliberately taking a hiatus. So he's trying to get this done and out of the way as quickly as possible, which results in a story development that doesn't quite feel natural, that feels a little bit forced, that feels a little bit too abrupt, because it literally is. So that's my opinion of Hunter x Hunter, lately, at least. To my pleasant surprise, acclaimed live-action film director Shinji Iwai this past week released a 3-short-episode anime series online on YouTube. These are the Town Workers short episodes. Each rotoscoped anime is about 6 minutes long. These really came out with no advance notice. There's very little publicity on them in the Japanese press. There is no word about them whatsoever in the English language press. But these are getting some coverage in Japan, because these are, strictly speaking, the first anime directed by Shinji Iwai. For those of you that are not familiar with him, Shinji Iwai is a multi-award-winning, eclectic and acclaimed Japanese live-action film director who is best known for directing very sort of subdued, you could say almost existentialist, a sort of slice-of-life, dramatic, romantic movies. Some of his movies include Swallowtail Butterfly. That's the first one that's the first and I think only one that I watched a number of years ago. He may be best known for All About Lily Cho-Cho. His more recent films are Hana and Alice. This is not, strictly speaking, his first endeavor into anime. He wrote the screenplay for the 2009 sci-fi short anime film Baton, which was directed by Versus director Ryuhei Kitamura. But these 3 Town Workers episodes are the first anime that Shinji Iwai personally has directed. What I'm personally fascinated by these about is seeing a acclaimed live-action director crossing over into anime. The practice here, in a sense, sort of gives a little bit more credibility to anime. When we see acclaimed, award-winning, serious live-action film directors working in the anime medium, it kind of gives some credibility and some class, some integrity to the art form and the medium of anime. Now, this isn't the first time this sort of crossover has happened, but it hasn't happened recently. Way back, for example, in 1967, Japanese New Wave director Nagisa Oshima directed the Ninja Bugecho feature film, but that's not a very well-known anime. The acclaimed veteran Japanese live-action samurai movie director Kiichi Okamoto supervised the production of the 1978 Science Ninja Team Gatchaman feature film, but he did not personally direct the movie. So we haven't seen crossovers from Japanese live action into anime in a number of years. On that subject, I do have to admit, I'm a little bit surprised that with the number of films he's directed, Takeshi Miike has not yet actually directed an anime. He's directed a number of anime into live-action adaptations, but he has not yet gone from live-action into anime. But, anyway, that happened to be one particular thing that's on my mind. Another thing that happened to be on my mind lately is that I am really amazed and fascinated that the whole Gamergate controversy is now in its third or fourth or even fifth week. I'm really amazed that the Zoe Quinn controversy that broke out several weeks ago is not only still ongoing, but apparently continuing to get even bigger. Apparently now there's a possibility that even WikiLeaks is going to start investigating this controversy about corruption in the video game journalism world. Who would have ever thought, folks? I tangentially am even involved in that industry and never would have seen this coming. But then again, I've never expected a tremendous amount of integrity out of video game journalism in the first place, so none of this actually surprises me at all. But apparently there have been a large number of English-speaking readers that actually have assumed that video game journalism equated to real, credentialed, dependable, reliable journalism instead of elitist commercial blogging, which is, in my opinion, what it has always been. Or indirect advertising, which probably, practically speaking, is more realistically accurate to what it actually is and always has been. But, in any case, I simply am fascinated, personally, by the fact that this whole Zoe Quinn Gamergate controversy is still ongoing and apparently continuing to expand and grow, ironically, while an increasing number of websites censor discussion about it. Because apparently, as of very recently, 4chan has started censoring and limiting discussion of the controversy. Well, anyway, it's not directly related to anime, so I'm not going to get into it. What I am going to get into is 2 weeks from now, the Necronomicon convention, which is being held this year in Clearwater instead of Tampa. Some of you may recall that I went to Necronomicon in Tampa as a dealer last year for the first time ever. I have been attending the Necronomicon convention almost annually since 1988. The convention is now into its, I believe, 31st year. So the convention has been going on annually for a very, very long time. But I will be attending Necronomicon in Clearwater 2 weeks from now, once again as a dealer, selling off largely excess from my personal collection, and just simply enjoying the atmosphere of a dark fantasy, ultra-hardcore, geeky convention. Necronomicon, for those of you that have never attended it, is a very small, very tight-knit convention for uber hardcore fantasy and sci-fi geeks. This is really not necessarily a convention for casual fans because they will feel very, very alienated and out of place and very, very superficial compared to the typical level of devotion from Necronomicon attendees. But if you happen to be in the Bay Area 2 weeks from now, on October 3rd to 5th, I invite you to come on out to the Causeway and see me and the Necronomicon convention. I also hope that you'll tune back in next week for another AnimeNation podcast. And in the meantime, I encourage you, while we have said goodbye to AnimeNation, Ranked Anime and the AnimeNation forums are still very active. So please stop in and say hi. Until next week, thanks for watching.